All right, today we're diving into a really interesting company. It's a South Korean giant that's on one hand, building the future. We're talking AI, hydrogen, biotech, the whole nine yards. But on the other hand, it's dealing with some pretty serious financial stress. This is the story of KOLON, and it's a fascinating one. So this is the big question, right? How does a company try to invent the future while basically walking a financial tightrope? It's such a great question. And KOLON is this perfect case study of an old-school giant trying to pull off a massive, radical change. You've got this world-class, cutting-edge innovation on one side, and then you flip it over and see a balance sheet that makes you go, okay, what's really going on here? Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll check out their big pivot into high-tech stuff. Then, we'll zoom out and see what the whole company looks like. After that, we dive into a huge biotech gamble they're taking. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the financials, and finally, we'll put it all together, risks versus opportunities. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, a giant's high-tech pivot. This is all about the engine of innovation.
So, at the very heart of KOLON's future strategy is this massive pivot. They're basically shifting gears, moving away from their traditional chemical business and going all in on these really high-value materials. We're talking about the stuff that's going to power AI, 5G, and the whole hydrogen economy. It's a huge move. So what is this stuff, MPPO? Well, think of it like the asphalt for a data superhighway. For things like AI and 5G to run at those insane speeds we hear about, you need circuit boards that don't create traffic jams for the electrical signals. MPPO is a key material that helps make those ultra-fast, low-drag lanes for data. It's absolutely crucial. And believe me, they are not messing around. They're backing this up with serious cash. We're talking 34 billion won. That's a huge investment into new production facilities for this MPPO material, and they're slated to be up and running by the middle of 2026. The goal here is pretty clear. They want to be a major player in what could be a very, very profitable market. But okay, it's not just about circuit boards. Their big tech pivot has another major pillar: hydrogen. And just like we saw with MPPO, they're not just, dabbling, they are going deep, trying to become a dominant force across the entire hydrogen economy's supply chain. And you can really see their strategy here. They're making all these critical parts for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. For example, they're a big deal in humidifiers, which you can kind of think of them as the lungs of a fuel cell. They manage all the moisture. But they also make the proton exchange membranes, the PEM, and the whole membrane electrode assembly, or MEA. On top of that, they're even working on high-pressure hydrogen tanks. So they're really trying to be involved at every single step of the process. Okay, so now for Section 2. It's important to remember that all this high-tech stuff we've been talking about, that's happening inside KOLON Industries. But that's just one part of a much bigger picture. Let's zoom out to see the true scale of this conglomerate. And here it is, the whole shebang. KOLON is a classic conglomerate, or chaebol as they're known in Korea. You've got KOLON Global, which builds huge apartment complexes. Then there's KOLON Mobility, which has this incredible, almost monopolistic grip on distributing luxury cars like BMW and Rolls-Royce. These older, more stable businesses are kind of the foundation that lets them make these big, risky bets in advanced materials, aerospace, and that bio and pharma division we're about to talk about. All right, Section 3. This is where things get really interesting. We're about to look at the biggest wild card in KOLON's entire portfolio. It's a massive, high-risk, super high-reward gamble in biotech. So the drug is called TGC. It's being developed by their subsidiary, KOLON Tissue Gene, and it's a potential game changer. This is a cell and gene therapy for osteoarthritis, which affects millions and millions of people. And the key thing here is it's not just another painkiller. The goal is to actually change the course of the disease itself. Right now, it's deep into phase 3 clinical trials here in the US, which is the final step before potential approval. Now, let's talk about the potential payoff, because it is absolutely massive. $5.4 billion. That's the estimated peak market size in the US alone if this thing gets FDA approval. I mean, just think about that. A success on that scale wouldn't just be a win. It would completely transform the entire KOLON group. But, and this is a huge but, here's the other side of that coin. This same drug actually had its approval canceled back home in South Korea because of an issue with mislabeling some of the cell ingredients. It's a huge legal battle that's gone all the way to their Supreme Court. So now everything, I mean literally everything, is riding on the outcome of these US FDA trials. It is the absolute definition of a high-stakes bet. Okay, so that massive gamble brings us perfectly to the other face of KOLON. We've seen the shiny, exciting, innovative side. Now it's time to decode the financials and look at the cold, hard numbers that tell a much more complicated story. So if we just glance at their balance sheet, you see the whole paradox right there in the numbers. They've got a ton of assets, right? Over 7 trillion won. That's a lot. But then you look at the other column and you see a mountain of debt. Liabilities clocking in at over 4.7 trillion won. So a lot coming in, but a lot owed. And that brings their debt to equity ratio to almost 192%. So what does that mean? Well, put simply, for every $1 of value that shareholders actually own in the company, there's almost $2 of debt sitting on top of it. That is a lot of financial leverage. You know, if you really want to see what's going on under the hood, a DuPont analysis is perfect. It shows that, yeah, their assets are working pretty hard to generate sales. That's the asset turnover part, but it's just not enough. The costs and, crucially, the interest payments on all that debt are eating up all the profit and then some, which leads to a negative net profit margin. And then that high leverage we just talked about, the equity multiplier, it basically acts like a megaphone for that loss, which is why shareholders are seeing a negative return. And this quote from a financial analyst really sums up the pressure they're under. It says, the company is in the gray zone and heavily reliant on refinancing to maintain liquidity. What that means in plain English is that they have more short-term bills coming due than they have ready cash to pay them. So they have to constantly borrow new money to pay off old money just to keep the lights on. That's a tough spot to be in. All right, Section 5, let's put these two completely different stories together. What's the final verdict here? What does the big picture for KOLON really look like when you weigh the risks versus the opportunities? So here it is, laid out side by side. On the one hand, their strengths are rock solid. That luxury car business is basically a cash machine, and their position in advanced materials like aramid and hydrogen parts gives them a real edge. And the opportunities? My gosh, the growth in 5G and EVs is huge, and if that TGC drug hits, it's explosive. But then you look at the other side. The weaknesses are just as scary. Those massive interest payments are a constant drag. And all that R&D, especially in biotech, just burns through cash. And all of this is happening in a really tough, high-interest environment where simply refinancing your debt is a major threat in itself. When you boil it all down, this is what KOLON's future looks like. It's a race. A high-stakes race between its incredible innovation engine and its crushing financial obligations. That's it. That's the whole story right there. And so that leaves us with this one final massive question. Can all these amazing high-tech bets in AI, in hydrogen, in biotech, can they actually pay off before their financial risks come due? The clock is ticking, and we're about to find out.